Well, Qt, essentially, as you can see on the picture, is an abstraction layer. It's a C++ library, and if your Qt code is built the right way, then if the Qt library gets ported, your code gets ported just about to any operating system which you might consider interesting. So if I have a Qt app, and it's written for, it works on Windows, it works on Linux, it works on Mac, it works on Android, it works on Windows Phone. One code, all systems. How is this achieved? You see here that there is a three-step building process. In the first step, qmake is invoked to create a project file. This project file is then transpiled to a native make file, which finally gets compiled by the actual make utility of the native target operating system. So this means that a Qt application at runtime is a native application with a lot of stupid libraries. Seriously, from the operating system point of view, there is no difference between a Qt and a normal C++ app. And as already mentioned, this is accomplished via .pro files. A .pro file, such as the one shown on the screen, describes the entire content of a Qt project. It mentions the resources, it mentions the source files and the headers. And this file is then used for the creation of the actual native toolchain. Before we get into the actual code, they are fleeing already. What do I need to be a successful cross-platform developer with Qt? You should, in practice, you should expect to have access to Linux, Mac OS, and Windows operating systems if you want to target all supported platforms. Who of you knows why you need Mac OS? Why do you need Mac OS if you want to be targeting all platforms? Any ideas? Not exactly, he tried, but...
different system for backslashes and...
No, because the Church of Apple demands you to worship it by buying an Apple computer. If you want to develop for iOS, you need to buy an Apple computer. Same thing with the Church of Microsoft. If you want to develop for Windows Phone, you need a workstation with Windows 8, otherwise you can't compile. Then you need a version control system to shuttle the code around between the various computers. And finally, a personal bit of advice from me, don't play ping pong. Pick one combination of target phone and operating system which you use for development. Complete the feature, and when the feature itself is completely working, then you start the cross-platform tests. This is beneficial because then you don't need to worry about the application logic and the cross-platform problems at the same time. Mr. Photographer. Are there any questions so far? Any feedback so far? Who of you has not understood the concept? Good. When it comes to dealing with Qt, there is one very, very, very basic thing. This is like cooking pasta. You need to understand the signal slot system. No signal slot system, no Qt, no pasta, starving. Same thing. The signal slot system is very easy. It's a callback system. It's done the Qt way. And as I mentioned already, it's used for event processing. How does this work? Let's assume that I am sitting in an airline lounge, yes? And my wife is sitting behind a notebook and she's working on a file. And some other female is sitting behind a notebook and is also working on a file. And her boss and me are standing on the bar drinking vodka. And my wife goes, job complete. Then I hear the signal, job complete. In my brain there is a slot for as we already said, a signal is emitted by a Q object to say that something has happened. A slot is a member function which the operating system, or the Qt library system, invokes when something has happened. Very simple, very logical. Signals and slots are connected, and there is one very important thing. These connections take place at runtime. Who of you knows what this means? Let's assume I have an ANET object. And the ANET object, I connect to the signal scream. But she hasn't developed screaming yet. She's well-mannered. What would happen? Who thinks a crash would happen? Nothing happens. Because the connections are done only at runtime. At compile time, the system cannot check whether the signals and the slots can be connected. And this is very, very important when testing your application. You should try to make sure that every connect call gets checked by your unit tests. Well, the actual components of a project, let me see how much time I still have. Yes, I do. We have the C++ files, the normal ones. They contain code. During the compilation, the Qt-specific bits of the C++ code are extended with macros. These macros are contained in .mock files. These mock files must not be uploaded to the version control system. Why must they not be uploaded to the version control system? Reminds me of these old grenades which you threw like this. Seriously, one day I'm going to do it if the microphones don't work at all these congresses. One day I'm going to chuck one at the technician. But I'm going to do it somewhere where I know the government, so nothing happens to me. But okay, he was completely right. These mock files change at every compilation. And let me tell you, they fuck up your CVS. You've got 50,000 fucking commits from the fucking mock file. So they really need to be out of the fucking CVS. The same thing is valid for the .ui files. The .ui files, which are responsible for Qt GUI user interface, we discuss them in the next step, they spawn a child called ui.h file. These files also change permanently. Then we have the .pro project control files. We have header files, and we have QML files. Any questions, any feedback so far? Next up is layouts. Who of you has ever developed for the desktop? This guy in the back really is, wait, I want to hit this guy. I'm gonna have to isolate the Rasta guy. Wait a minute. Oh shit. You're the greatest, man, seriously. On the desktop, Qt provides a GUI stack which is called Qt GUI. And Qt GUI is tremendously powerful because it contains a layout engine. What does this layout engine do? You see, we've got some new people coming in who will get some chocolates thrown at them for being late. Let's assume that they are coming in. And let's assume that this is a magic, cute Congress room. Then I could increase the size of the Congress room to give them new seats. And this is the whole idea behind layouts. The chocolate remains edible even if it hits the ground. You can eat it even if it has hit the ground. It's no problem. So, I started out with some controls, and I gave these controls some layouts. As you see here, the layouts were added to the controls. A layout is either horizontal or vertical. And you must imagine a layout to be like rails. So it's, if I have a layout, it goes this way, then I can be like choo, 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 but I can't go this way. And the blue controls you see here, they are antisocial controls, also known as spacers. Who of you wants to be the spacer? I need a spacer. You want to be a spacer? Come here. Okay. Just push me to the side. This is a spacer. And this is a layout. We have a layout from here to here. And I am Mr. Control, and he is Mr. Spacer. You go to the wall, and then you push me to the other wall. And now it's design time, and now it's at run time. Go, Mr. Spacer. You see how the spacer expands, pushes me along the layout, donk, until I've hit the place where I should be. And you see this already here, how the one spacer pushes the slider to the left and the text label to the right. And then finally a form layout is applied in order to make the Qt GUI stack resize the controls. And as we already said, the actual communication then is done via signals and slots. You see here I have a value changed signal and I connect it to the slider moved slot. Who of you has worked with Qt GUI in the past? Who of you thinks that he will use Qt GUI a lot in the future? You are wrong. Qt GUI is an impressive technology for the desktop. If you are working for the mobile space, Qt GUI is essentially dead. And the reason for this is a new language called QML. The problem with Qt GUI is that it's very badly suited to phones. You can't do animations with it, and since every control has to be bound to a native control, porting the actual Qt GUI library is almost impossible. The port to Symbian took months, and the controls looked like shit, and they didn't work 50% of the time. That's very easy to explain. Symbian is a list-centric operating system. Qt GUI is a widget-centric GUI stack. You can't really match. Okay, if we take a tall 2-meter red-haired woman and we gang her up with a little blonde one, they will scratch one another for sure. And it's much the same with list and widget-based frameworks, or with me and people who don't drink alcohol. And what was the solution? The solution was the creation of QML. QML is basically it's a gang of primitives, of brutes, just like me. But while I talk shit, these brutes display rectangles, bitmaps, rounded corners, texts, and so on. And the developers, this means you lot, use these simple to port primitives to create advanced controls. And the second advantage is the integrated animation framework. Because the primitives are simple, they are simple to animate. I'm going to go and look at this in a minute. But first of all, let's start out with a component. Our own custom widget. That was for the female. That's white chocolate. I told him. Okay. Either way, if you want to start a new component in QML, you simply spawn a new. Okay, he didn't look at me. You simply spawn a new file. So this file is called Tam's component.qml. And its content is a rectangle size 300 times 300 in some ugly bluish shade. And I now add a child, a text box, which is shown inside, and I add a property. What is the job of a property? Who knows what the job of a property is? Okay, a property is a way to handle an internal state. Let me give again an example with my wife. She isn't here today, so she can be used. let's assume that Annette is sitting here and working. Under Slovak law, I cannot force her to use a specific computer. But if the Annette class is kind, and the Annette class has a property, Annette's notebook, I can use that property to give her an Elite book, to give her a Toy Book Air, to give her a Toy Book Pro, an Apple guy who's fleeing. This is an Apple church guy, he's fleeing because I'm insulting his prophet. Applause. And as you see here, I have the property which is connected, and then I can deploy the control simply by putting it in as a child, mein Knopf, and blah, blah, blah. QML essentially is JSON on steroids. It's JSON snorting a lot of cocaine. That's QML. And as we already said, we have the same problem again, namely that screen sizes differ a lot. And QML addresses this by the concept of anchors. How does this work? Let's assume that I have the room again is a magic room, and the room changes its size. And now I need a wall. Who wants to be the wall? Who wants to be the wall? Come on. Anyone? Okay, then assume that I am attached to a wall. My hand is holding a wall. As the wall moves, I move along with the wall. And it's much the same with QML. QML properties expose these 9 points which you see here in the diagram. And you can attach a control to any of these 9 points of its parent. So if I have a parent and I attach my middle to the middle of the parent, I will always be in the middle of the parent. And here you see how I'm setting the anchor vertical center and anchor horizontal center of the text box so that the text box remains in the middle of the parent rectangle. Yes?
It's like relative layout.
Exactly. This guy is thinking. This is great. Who was it? Was it you or was it your wife, assistant, whatever? Who had the idea? Who of you had the idea? Okay, it was you. Because I've got only 2 more of these white things, so. And now I've got a little more complex example. Namely, I want to create a box which is inside of another box. This is becoming a button, by the way. In the end, it's going to be a button. And so I want a box inside of another box. Theoretically, it is shown for you on the left. I just attach the middles to one another, and I say that the width and the height of the child is a wee bit smaller than the width and the height of the parent. This works flawlessly. But the problem is, because the child is always in the center of the parent, the space on the sides is uniform. And the solution on the right side permits you to have non-uniform spacing on the borders. Okay. So far, we have been looking at single controls, positioning a single child. What do you think comes next? What? Who had the idea with the multiple child? Exactly. And there, I forgot to translate it. Okay, there are passive and active layouts. The passive layouts are called positioners, and there are 3 of them: column, row, and grid. Forget the German slide, you don't need it, because This is much better. This is a real grid. It has 2 columns and 3 rows. And yes? Okay, that was no feedback, so I'm just coughing, okay. And it has 2 columns and 3 rows. And because I'm lazy as a dog, I don't want to put the children in by hand. So what do? I use a repeater control. The repeater control automatically spawns instances of the Mein Knopf button. So you see here, I'm spawning a total of 6 Mein Knopfs. So the grid gets 6 of the controls which we created before. And the problem is, since the grid is passive, the grid, if it's passive, can it calculate the size of the children or not? Who says yes? Who says no? And who was just hungry and wants more chocolate? The people who said no were right. And this, I'm solving it by having the width and height formulas. In QML, any property can also be a JavaScript string. And the engine, the layout engine, whenever the property is affected, automatically computes the value of the string. You can even put an alert call into this, and whenever the width gets computed, an alert gets thrown. You can do an awful lot of shit with QML. And then there is, of course, also the layouts. The layouts, the active ones, they directly decide and judge about the size of their children. The benefit of this is you don't need the formula, which I had to use on the slide before, but the disadvantage is, in Finland, there is a little company, they are called Jolla. And Jolla are very, very lazy. They are Finnish, they drink a lot of vodka in the sauna, and then they fall asleep in the sauna. And then the big Finnish female drag them out, beat them, they code a little bit, and they go back to the sauna. And the problem is with this, that they have not ported layouts. They simply decide layouts is an optional module. It's optional, fuck you. But when you are working on a platform which supports layouts, you essentially have the fill and the preferred attributes. So then every control says, I want to grow this way, I want to grow this way, or I don't want to grow. And then the layout engine at runtime allocates the space to the controls as it has been defined. Since lunch is next, I wanted to tell you that if you want to see any of this in action, after the official part of the talk is over, just come forward and we can demo any component which we've seen here as long as you want. And so far, our QML has been relatively passive. As I already mentioned, QML can contain JavaScript, but it can also be addressed from C++. And this is very important. Why? A complex form contains 200 or 300 entities. Do you want to access all of these 300 entities from your logic? Normally not, no? Who wants to access all the 300 stupid little entities from his code? Whose employee wants to do this? So, this is stupid to do. It would add an incredible level of overhead because every little widget in the DOM tree is attached to one or more strings. So how is this solved? QML solves it by creating a group of attributes. The ID, if you give an ID to a control, you say this control must be accessible from JavaScript. If you give an object name to the control, you say this control must be accessible from C++. If you give a name and an object ID, then what do you say? What? Who's at both? Seriously, the chocolate survives impact with the ground. It's an Austrian government product, but it's good quality. Surprising for the Austrian government, but really it's good chocolate. They survive an impact on the ground. And this method is the most important thing when you are dealing with QML. This code, if you give it a pointer and an object name, it finds a pointer to the control no matter where the control is in the DOM tree. This is a recursive DOM tree parser. If you want the method, just let me know. I give you the slides directly after the talk. This function, it should be, you should write it on your hand if you don't know it by heart. You'll need it every day. But sadly, using it is not a really good idea. Why is this evil? Who of you has an idea why this is evil? I am getting a reference to an object and I'm changing its color. Why is this evil? Who of you has an idea? What? He is thinking actively. It is not wrong, but it's not the real reason for evil. Francesco, is this an employee of yours or is it a guest? Is it an employee of yours or a guest? Do you want to participate in the joke? This woman is graphically very skilled, a good designer. Please applause for her. Stand up. Stand up. Now, me being not particularly intelligent, she cannot read my thoughts because they are too low for her. I am too stupid that she can read my thoughts. And now she decides that rect is an ugly name. Rect is an ugly name, no? Yes, it's an ugly name. Rect is an ugly name, no? Yes. And how would you call a rectangle which is to become red? Give it a funny name.
I don't know.
Okay, she calls it no. It's also a valid idea. It's valid. It's a valid name. What's so funny? It's a valid name. She did the right decision. But I don't know about it. I was drunk. And now I run this code. The retrieval call find child returns null, and invoking the arrow operator on a null leads to a zigzag error. So if you have code like this and you forget to test it once and there is the one little stupid change in the QML file, the entire app goes up in smoke. So this is really something you should avoid if you can. But what's the alternative? What is a sensible and sane way to interact between QML and C++? Who has an idea? Who thinks that the signal slot system is a sensible idea? Okay, I'm glad to break the news to you today that QML controls are perfectly integrated into C++. A QML control is a first-class citizen in the signal slot framework. It can receive signals and emit signals. So this means that we have here our button again, and if the button gets clicked, a signal is emitted. And this signal is then handled anywhere. It can be handled in QML or it can be handled in C++. What's the benefit of this? What's the benefit? The benefit is this: directly accessing an element in response to a signal. If the signal doesn't exist, nothing happens. The app doesn't work, but it doesn't crash. Whereas if you would access it with a pointer, the app would crash. If you access it with a signal, if the signal slot connection isn't established, this feature doesn't work. But the rest of the program keeps working and stays alive. And so you see here, we are emitting the signal. We can connect it at runtime, and then we can profit. Next point. Who of you has ever done animations? QML makes making animations really, really simple because it works on the keyframe principle. How does the keyframe principle work? This guy wants some chocolate. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate the keyframe principle with our friend who wants some chocolate. The beginning state is that the chocolate is here. The end state is the chocolate is here with him. Let's pick it up. And we have the beginning and we have the end state. And we have a transition, which is called easing. I can hit him over the head with it. I can deliver it by hand. I can throw it over my back. Or I can ask her to bring it to him. That's the easing function. And if I define an end state, a beginning state, and an easing function, I have accomplished a complete animation. It is completely defined, the animation. And if this is done, you simply trigger it by saying start. And I didn't promise you bullshit. This here is a complete color change. It changes the background color of a control smoothly within 100 milliseconds from whatever state it had to a bright red. One line of code, a complex animation. So, how much time do I still have? 5 minutes. I need to ask you guys to vote. Who of you wants to have a 10-minute longer talk? Who of you wants to know more about localization? And who of you prefers more about cross-platform development? Okay, then we're going to do cross-platform first. When it comes towards taming nativity, the thing is this: since a QML app gets processed by the C++ compiler, you can just drop in some native code, for example, for Symbian code. And then you put in an if-def, and you think the if-def will solve the problem. Well, it does solve the problem, but you've got 3 problems. Number 1, the CVS gets strained, because every time you change the header to change the active platform, the version control system gets 1 commit. The second problem, the code gets messy. And the third problem is you need frequent recompiles. Whenever you change the value of the header, you have to recompile the entire application. If you have a big code base like Pirna takes 10 minutes to compile an 8-core workstation. And imagine the beauty of swapping from a Windows phone to Android and having to wait 10 minutes. Annette, where is my coffee? So, fortunately, we can solve this, but with a little trick. The .profile is a very, 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 very intelligent file. About as smart as you. I meant you there. No, the guy in the middle. A .profile can be given segments. You can tell the .profile, this bit of code is only for Windows. This bit of code is only for Android. This bit of code is only for iOS, as you see here. And then you implement a common header with a local code file for every platform. And if this is not enough, you can have a common interface. You can even have a common function pointer. That's what Annette recently did. It was quite fun. She ported code from a small embedded processor to C++, and we had a function pointer interface. And she literally created a structure of function pointers as a common interface in C++. It works, but it's not very sane to do if you don't need the performance. And then the final problem for cross-platform development is the GUI stacks. You've got 4 different GUI stacks. You've got Cascades for the BlackBerry, you've got Silica for Sailfish OS, you've got QML for everything, and you've got Qt GUI for everything except Jolla. So what do? At minimum, you need 2 stacks. You cannot reuse desktop and mobile code for one another. It doesn't work. To have the same user interface for both platforms is impossible. So in practice, you will need at minimum a Qt GUI implementation, and you will need a QML sub-implementation. And you can, in theory, also do Cascades or Silica. Basically, if you can get a bribe from the company, then you do it. It's as easy as that. Call up Jolla, I want a free phone, then I port my app. And then they'll either say sauna, or they'll say sauna. And if they say sauna and send you a free phone, then you start porting. That's how I do it. And when it gets really complex, you can work with a layout abstraction class. So you have the layout. The layout, which is cross-platform QML, all QML stacks have layouts, contains only abstraction classes, which are then changed out at compile time. But sadly, this causes a significant increase in effort. And with that, I've still got 2 minutes for some weird ideas. First of all, you can also use Qt on the web. There is a product called Emscripten, which is an LLVM backup, a backend. So the GCC compiles an assembler language, which is then run in the JavaScript runtime. This works, but is tremendously slow. And as an alternative, you can also use a WebSocket. In this case, you have a backend, for example, a group of Raspberry Pis. They provide the backend logic in Qt, and via a WebSocket, they provide access to a JavaScript user interface. And with that, I am very thankful for your attention. I hope that you have some questions and that you have enjoyed my talk. Please give me good feedback when the organizers ask you whether you want to hear me again. Thank you so much. I'll be around for questions.